Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us all. Your Honor, Mrs. Frances Seymour, the Director General of CIFOR, Excellencies, Ministers and Ambassadors, Chief of the International Organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my appreciation to the Center for International Forestry Research, CIFOR, for organizing this event. Let me also congratulate CIFOR for its strong contribution to Indonesia for the past 20 years in the field of forestry research, education, and development training. Indeed, it has become a global-scale international organization in the field of forestry. This event could not be more timely. Next week, I will depart to Mexico to attend the G20 leaders meeting in Los Cabos. Right after that, I will go to Brazil to attend the Rio +20 summit in Rio. In September, at the invitations of the UN Secretary General, I will travel to New York to attend the high-level panel post-2015 development agenda. In all these places, we all hope for constructive outcomes that will make us feel better about the future directions of the world. Our planet is under duress. The human race faces enormous challenges. Our common future is filled with hope, but it is also riddled with questions, big questions. It took tens of thousands of years for the human race to reach 1 billion people around 1800. It took merely 13 years for humanity to reach the last billion since 1999. The good news is that world population will peak and stabilize at around 9 billion, perhaps by around 2045. But a lot will happen between now and 2050. There will be major economic, environmental, social changes, not to mention political and security changes. Economically, for example, the world GDP will expand dramatically. In Asia alone, by 2050, in an optimistic scenario, the combined GDP of its economies will reach some 161 trillion US dollars. According to Asia Development Bank, 90% of that growth will come from the Asia 7, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. As prosperity spreads, the number of countries climbing up the rank of middle-income countries will grow, and so will, we hope, the number of countries graduating to advanced economy status. This will be coupled with the continued growth of the middle class. The Economist reported not long ago that, for the first time in history, half of the world population can be loosely defined as middle class. And this phenomenon will intensify. In Asia, an additional 2 billion people will join the middle class by 2050. Indeed, this middle class phenomenon, always dreamed of, but only occasionally achieved in previous centuries, will become a key feature of the 21st century. The global landscape will also change due to rapid urbanization, which will rise in parallel with the proliferation of megacities. In Indonesia, we crossed that 50% mark of urbanized population 4 years ago. By 2025, 65% of our population will live in cities. In short, We are heading toward 9 billion people, along with their needs and means. That means a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of people to produce for, a lot of economies to power up. The problem is our natural ecosystems and regenerating biocapacity are being severely degraded, therefore compromising the ability of the planet to sustain life. Our natural resources are depleting, some rapidly. Natural ecosystems are threatened. Water, land, and air are getting increasingly polluted. Water reserves are falling. Soil erosion is leading to desertification. Global warming is already happening, and species are dying out faster than their innate rate of extinction. We are living in a world of cruel paradox. It is a world of plenty, but it is also a world growing inequality. It is a world marked by a sea of opportunity, but it is also a world of rising scarcity. It is a world of wonderful connectivity, but it is also a world burdened by rising insecurity. We are already seeing a worrying rise in resources competition, some of which have turned into conflict, and the possibility of war cannot be totally dismissed. This cruel, dangerous paradox cannot be addressed by wishing it away. It cannot be resolved by ad hoc policy fixes here and there. It cannot be resolved just by allocating more resources to those issues. What is required is a fundamental reinvention and reorganization of societies throughout the world. It also requires the international system to work more coherently and more purposely to address what is inherently a global problem. I believe we can turn plenty into better equity. We can maximize opportunity while minimizing scarcity. And we can use connectivity to promote security. But to achieve all this, the time to choose is now. And the time to act is now. What are our choices? We can choose to continue to exhaust the present course, the same course that has been in place for decades and centuries. A world where we obsessively chase after economic growth without regard for ethics or the environment. A world of excessive exploitations of resources and insatiable consumerism. A world driven by greed rather than need. If we go down this path, we will only find more of the same. It will lead us to more environmental degradation, more deforestation, more pollution, more global warming, more endangered species, more conflict between man and nature, and ultimately, more desperation for the human race. The other option is to choose a different course and to break from the practice of the past where we need to. We can opt for a different way, a new way that could guarantee a better future for world economies and citizens. For this new way to succeed, participation must be top-down and bottom-up. We are encouraged by the high level of environmental activisms among governments, international organizations, and NGOs in recent years. Ultimately, however, we need participation from the smallest unit in society, which is the individual. It is the individual who will ultimately have to make the choice of what he or she will buy, eat, drink, waste, or burn. And it will not be an easy choice because more and more individuals will have greater purchasing power and the luxury of options in his life. Unless we change the excessive consumption habit of world citizens, we will or run into a brick wall. As we grapple to overcome problems of scarcity, we are well advised to go back to what is essential to fulfill the simple hope and basic needs of our citizens. I believe their hope is rather simple. They want to be assured of a peaceful and prosperous life, and they want to live free from the fear of what the future holds for them and their children. I have found that somehow, the more people modernize, the more they yearn for simplicity and a happy life. When we are able to meet these basic needs of our citizens, we will establish a much stronger foundation for national and international security. Today, we are seeing seismic power shift in the international system. New emerging powers are changing the weight of the world and shaping the new global agenda. The changing international landscape should do more than to add to the already large crowd of power holders. They must also contribute to better resolutions of global problems. Thus, more than power shift, we need a paradigm shift. We need a new way of looking at the world and a new way to work the world. Now is the time to promote sustainable growth with equity. Many refer to sustainable development with equity as development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Equity is critical because it is about fairness. It is about justice. Without equity, we end up with restlessness and anxiety. Without equity, we end up with marginalization. Without equity, we end up with hopelessness and without a sense of shared destiny. Economic growth and justice are mutually reinforcing, and participation of economic actors in an inclusive and comprehensive way will not only increase justice, but also strengthen the sustainability of growth. It will also reduce inequality and development gaps, as well as balance economic, social, and environmental objectives for the present and future generation. This is why in the G20 leaders' discussion on fixing the world economy, I have always stressed the importance of the inclusive growth, because without this element, growth would be twisted. I am pleased that the G20 have now been persistent in calling for a strong, balanced, inclusive, and sustainable growth in the world economy. A key part of sustainable growth with equity is recognizing that the serious climate and environmental problems that planet Earth faces are not imagined. It is real. Climate change is man-made, and its solutions are also man-made. We must arrest the growing trend of ecological footprint deficit worldwide. According to one estimate, among the 20 largest economies in the world, 75% are in a position of ecological footprint deficit, whereas Brazil, Argentina, Canada, Russia, and Indonesia are in a state of ecological footprint surplus. Only by turning ecological footprint deficit into surplus can we achieve a sustainable life. To be sure, we cannot achieve sustainable growth with equity without addressing climate change. There are two sides of the same coin. In Indonesia, many of our islands and their inhabitants are already threatened by sea level rise, and rising temperatures and extreme weather patterns have already affected crop yields, a phenomenon that is expected to continue in the years to come. This is, of course, happening throughout the Asia Pacific. That is why sustainable forestry is critical to our effort at sustainable development as well as to our climate mitigation efforts. Our forests cover 69% of Indonesia's land area. And 31% of the global land, they hold a massive number of biodiversity that needs to be sustained. As a mega diverse country, we have about 12% of the world mammal, 16% of the world reptiles and amphibians, 17% of the world's birds, 25% of fish species, and over 38,000 of plant species. We consider this God-given rich biodiversity as enormous national treasures. It is worth reminding that sustainable forestry was not always an obvious policy choice. In the 1970s and 1980s, Indonesia favored different forestry policy. Put in other words, our forestry policy was to allow anyone to cut our forests so long as it gave benefits to development. It seemed the logical thing to do back then. We had lots of forests. We had to reduce poverty. We need to grow our economy. As a result, there was a time when we experienced very serious deforestation. Today, such a policy is no longer tenable. Losing our tropical rainforest would constitute the ultimate national, global, and planetary disaster. That's why Indonesia has reversed course by committing to sustainable forestry. We passed a law that would permanently conserve 35% of our tropical rainforests. We have also applied a moratorium for new permits on primary natural forests and peatlands to improve our forest and peatland management system. This new policy enhances the effort to reduce our deforestation and thus contribute significantly to the reductions of greenhouse gases emission. I am not pleased to inform that our deforestation, I am now pleased to inform that our deforestation rate has declined from 3.5 million hectares per year to less than half of million hectares per year in a decade period. We have to do more, of course. I am also heartened by the progress of the 1 billion Indonesia Trees for the World, OBIT program. I am pleased to inform you that in the past 2 years, we have planted some 3.2 billion trees, not 3.2 million, but 3.2 billion trees. In short, to promote sustainable forestry, we took stock of the situation, found serious problems, made quick adjustment, introduced new policies, and reform our development model. We did not blame the past, but we took action to correct the future. Indeed, there are a variety of effective tools that we can use to promote sustainable growth with equity. We can use policy measures. Governments can pass laws and regulations that would place sustainability at the heart of social activities, and also incentivize and reward activities that reinforce sustainability. Government can take the lead in raising public awareness. Governments can also undertake measures to help spread opportunity and provide a hand up to those at the bottom of economic ladder, for example, by promoting microcredit. We can also do more to alter our lifestyle so that it becomes climate and eco-friendly and fits harmoniously with our green growth agenda. In an era of hyper-consumerism, this will require a great deal of public education in our home, in our schools, and in our workplace. And we can also use more technology. Whether we are talking about food security, energy shortage, or climate security, a great deal of our problem can be resolved with technological innovation. I believe that more than ever, technology will be the greatest driver of change in the 21st century. I am pleased that we are now seeing a new trend where emerging economies too are becoming centers of new innovation and are spending more on research and development. This is a good sign. The important thing is that, where possible, all this innovation is not only invented, but shared with others for mutual benefit. Governments, the private sector, and NGOs can all do their part in making this happen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, promoting sustainable growth with equity will be a constant learning experience, as it is with me. When I came to office as president in 2004, my development mantra had three basic components: pro-growth, pro-poor, and pro-job. 3 years later, in 2007, Indonesia successfully hosted the UN Climate Conference in Bali. And ever since then, we became very active in global climate diplomacy. And we expanded our development strategy, not just pro-growth, pro-poor, and pro-job, but also pro-environment. Today, environmental sustainability is at the heart of all long-term development plans, both at the national and local level. In all this, political will was crucial and remained crucial. It was not always easy to advance environmentally sound policies, but it was necessary, and it was the right things to do. So we pushed hard at, it despite some resistance. Why is political will important? Because in most cases, the solutions are actually simple, but they are hard to achieve. Reduce emissions, consume less, shift to renewables, conserve forests, save energy, share technology, take global action. These prescriptions are all known to us. They are part of the global conscience. They are spotted by public opinion. But too often, the solution becomes stuck in narrow self-interest, short-sighted policies, and rigid diplomacy, or a combination of them. There are two major issues that will affect the prospect of sustainable growth with equity: the MDGs and the Kyoto Protocol. On MDGs, we have indeed come a long way in our effort to reach the MDG target. For example, in reducing poverty, reducing child mortality, promoting basic education, and others. Despite ongoing concern over global financial stability this year, we must make use of the next few years to make maximum gains on these MDGs target until 2015. We must now begin to think about what the international community needs to do after 2015, when the present overarching development framework for MDG will end. The MDG is arguably the most ambitious global development project ever undertaken in history. What is certain is that we still have plenty of development work to do. What is certain is that by 2015, we will have a better foundation for development as a result of MDG program, and that we will have a rich body of lessons learned, both from successes and failures. We will need to do all this during the MDG midterm summit review next year. Let us make sure that the post-2015 MDGs Global Development Framework be long-term, comprehensive, resourceful, ambitious, global, and able to build upon the achievements of the MDGs. Another milestone global treaty is one that will expire at the end of this year is the Kyoto Protocol. The international community has made some progress since Kyoto Protocol was first signed. We have achieved common understanding and willingness to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A number of countries have voluntarily committed to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Indonesia's target for 2020 is reducing 26% of the greenhouse gas emissions, or 41% with international support. Carbon market is already established, even though its work is still far from what was initially expected. Even though the world GDP dropped 0.6% in 2009, the volumes of carbon trade still demonstrate surprising resiliency, with the market value increase about 6%. At this time, the driving force of carbon market is still dominated by European countries, which are now facing economic and financial difficulties. In the spirit of common and differentiated responsibility, Indonesia believes that developed countries should take lead in reducing emissions, but developing countries should also do more. Unfortunately, not all developed countries which are the emitters, which are the emitters of greenhouse gas, have agreed to the Kyoto Protocol. And the fact remains, many developed countries have failed to fulfill their commitment, which were agreed in Kyoto. Also, programs that link effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with program of technology transfer and poverty reduction in developing countries did not work as expected and targeted. The first commitment of the Kyoto Protocol ends at the end of this year. We expect to have an interim arrangement for a second period commitment, which will last either 5 years to 2017 or 8 years to 2020, which will be decided in Doha, Qatar. However, that second commitment is still no substitute for a global climate treaty that is still elusive to this day. It also faces the challenge of how to galvanize the interests of the carbon market to the second commitment. Whatever the outcomes, we need to ensure that there is a good synergy between the post-2015 MDG Global Development Framework and the emerging global climate architecture. Their goals are, after all, mutually reinforcing. We need to ensure that the post-2015 framework of global development collaboration be built upon the principle of equality and open participation to all stakeholders. It must be aimed to empower the poor in developing countries. It must uphold the principle of cooperation and common responsibility that benefit all countries. And it must give greater role and access for emerging countries to participate actively in the effort to reduce poverty and address environmental issues. And whatever the framework, it should inch us closer to strong, balanced, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. What does it mean? Strong growth includes being able to fulfill the increasing basic need. It means being able to create a higher employment opportunity than the current growth of the working age population. It means being able to provide increasing supply of resources while also able to increase the income level above the inflation rate to increase the people's purchasing power. Balanced growth refers to growth which does not rely solely on the consumption and government budget, but also supported by investment and export, and vice versa. It signifies growth in terms of both demands and offer. It means growth that is neither concentrated on one or two countries, nor dependent only on one economic sector or areas. A quality growth needs to be supported by the development of secondary and tertiary sectors, and should not only rely on the extraction and exploitation of natural resources. In 2025, Indonesia aims to have an economic structure in which the 55% is supported by the tertiary sector, the 36% by secondary sectors, and the rest by the primary sectors. To accomplish this target, Indonesia plans to downstream the primary sectors and to provide additional values to the mining, forestry, agriculture, and fisheries products. The increasing level of the production output is balanced by the improvement of the quality of the environmental resources. Inclusive growth indicates an increase in every country access to technology, information, and capital in order to strengthen international connectivity. It requires fair access to production, distribution, and consumption, which emphasizes the aspect of affordability. It also necessitates increasing participation of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the production process to create a strong and inclusive economic structure. Lastly, sustainable growth points to the existence of an optimal balance between economic, socio-cultural, and environmental aspects. Here, economic growth needs to be supported by investment in people and technology. Indonesia plans to extend the limit of compulsory education program for children from 9 to 12 years of schooling starting the year of 2013. No exploitation of resources should exceed its biological regenerative capacity. Next week, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will join a number of world leaders and thousands of participants from all over the world for the Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro to mark the 20th anniversary of the Earth Summit. The event will be an opportunity for world leaders to renew their political commitment on developing a global green economy through sustainable development and poverty eradication. I will use the opportunity to send a message and call for action for the Sustainable Development Agenda in the post-Rio +20. Let's take responsibility for the future of human race and for Mother Earth. This is a call to all citizens of the world, developed, emerging, and developing nations, international and regional organizations, private sectors, environmentalists, and all stakeholders. We must avoid the dangerous trap of a waiting game. Consensus building, especially on global stage, will take time to build. We know the problems. We know the solution. We must act now. We are now in the midst of an uncertain global economic picture, especially with events in Eurozone economies and the upcoming referendum in Greece. We all have a stake in the speedy recovery of Eurozone economies. What happens there reminds us that no economy, no matter what their upward trajectory is, should take their growth for granted. It also reminds us that unemployment is a potentially explosive global problem. Indonesia too was hit during the global financial crisis of 2008, but back then we took swift action to prevent the worst from happening. We quickly convened meetings with all stakeholders, including corporate leaders and labor, and made sure they understood the importance of having no layoffs. In our view, the government could be broke, but not the people. As a result, we kept growth resiliently at around 4.5% during the height of global financial crisis and bounced back to 6.5% last year. That experience taught us to confront challenges head-on. We must be one step ahead of the problems. When the international climate negotiation faced a deadlock, Indonesia broke grounds and indeed broke ranks by announcing a new policy that we would aim to reduce emissions by 26% by 2020 and up to 41% with international assistance. And when faced with growing economic and environmental pressures, we responded by adopting the national policy of sustainable growth with equity. Finally, it is with the same belief in the power of courage and the power of creative solution, Indonesia seeks to work with all our international partners to find answers to the major issues of our time. I thank you.